So it turns out there's a lot of sexism happening at the Olympics.
Oh, is there? Well, that's hilarious. At least it seems to be to Jimmy Dore.
Not kidding. Well, here's from the Charlotte Observer. It says the NBC swim commentator defends comments criticized as sexist. What happened? So that's a woman named Katinka. I love that name, Katinka. Hi, what's your name? Katinka. I don't know why. It's just adorable. Katinka. Katinka. I love that name. Katanka, my sister Katanka. Katunka is my cousin. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Well, I don't really know either. But considering that this video is about, having basic respect for people, not being sexist and that sort of thing, what you're ultimately doing here is exposing yourself as having little respect, as belittling someone for their name and making silly assumptions about what other members of their family might have as names. Of course, they'd all be related, right? Because once a silly name, always a silly name.
But she won the world. She broke a world record in the 400-meter individual medley this on Saturday. So as the camera panned to her, they panned over to her coach, who's also her husband. And according to Huffington Post, I didn't see this happen, but according to Huffington Post, when the camera got to her coach, who's also her husband, the commenter said, and there's the man responsible.
Okay, I was going to cut out a lot of this awkward, disjointed delivery that Jimmy Dore had as he's trying to tell this story. And the more I watched it, the more I realized it needs to be left in, because this relates to the topic of the video. And the topic of the video, really, the title should be something like, "This is what sexism there is left in the West," or something like that, right? If this is what we have to point out as sexist behavior, and of course, the only sexist behavior we're going to point out is going to be perpetrated against females. We're not going to talk about any sexism that's perpetrated against men. That's not going to be happening here. But if we're going to be talking about sexism against females, this is what we've got down to. This is the bottom of the barrel. Similarly, this is obviously the bottom of the barrel for YouTube or otherwise commentators. This guy can't even deliver a line. He can't even pull himself together to... I got nothing.
So she didn't do it. There's someone else responsible for her achievement, getting a world record. There's someone else responsible.
Okay, now here we get down to the meat and potatoes of this thing. This is the sexism that is involved. It's because the person who has been called responsible is a man and she's a woman. If the genders were reversed, no one would care. And I think we kind of all know that. No one would care. What is being done here is, these commentators, not commentators, but commentators, their job is to fill dead air. That's all they're there for. They're there to fill dead air. And I watch lots of different sporting events and different things, and I hear the most stupid things said by commentators. And generally speaking, I give them a pass because I understand they're trying to fill dead air. That's their job. It's pretty easy to Monday morning quarterback or whatever you want to say to come back in and critique the things that they say. But it's kind of not all that fair. If your job was to constantly just make sure that there's no dead air while making sure you get a few sponsor plugs in and make sure you're prepared for commercial breaks and even being counted down, so you got to stretch out what you're saying so that it neatly fits within certain time slots, it's obviously not that easy. The other thing, of course, that's being done here is a lot of reading between the lines. Oh, she's not responsible. Well, they never said that she wasn't responsible, and this is going to get carried far further when someone else says it later on. Obviously, there's a charitable reading between the lines and an uncharitable reading between the lines. The uncharitable reading between the lines here is being used to say this person's motivation is sexist, and they're saying that this is the sole person responsible for her achievements, not her at all. A charitable reading of between the lines would be to say this is the person behind the scenes that helped her, sort of the things that he said there. And I think that's what the person meant, quite honestly. I've learned through my life that sometimes it's better to assume the best of a person rather than worst when you have nothing else to go by until such time as it's proven otherwise. It's a lot easier to go backwards. It's a lot easier to retract from a position of being charitable than it is from a position of assuming the worst about someone. But of course, in this disconnected age where we're all connected, but really, really disconnected, we're distanced from one another, it seems to be so easy to say things to or about someone from a distance across the internet than it would be to say that same thing to or about someone when you're face to face. It's kind of wimpy behavior, really.
So I don't mind you say, hey, there's her coach, had a lot of help. It helped her out a lot, did a lot to help her. That's one thing.
Well, and I kind of think that's what he intended. I think that's what he was trying to say. Now, everybody likes to say nowadays that intent doesn't matter, but that's what they're impugning here is his intent. They're saying that he's sexist, that he meant to be sexist. That's the only thing that you can say, or you can say that he's subconsciously being sexist. But once again, you have to seek clarification from the source, who's a person who's tasked with trying to fill a bunch of airtime and say clever things, and just ask the question. No one's willing to give anyone that kind of latitude anymore. It's always the dogpiling.
But he's not responsible. She's responsible.
Let me be clear. Everyone knows that. Everyone.
Here's how Jezebel.com reported it. They said on Saturday night, Hungary's Katinka Hosszú shattered the world record in the 400-meter individual medley. It's called the individual medley because it's completed start to finish by exactly one person. All 8 laps of it. Interestingly, Hosszú was not the primary person given credit for Hosszú's success.
Well, and obviously that's not true either. I'm sure if you look in the record books, her name would be there. I'm sure that she was the one who was given the medal. We're talking about something said by probably an airheaded commentator who, again, is tasked with trying to fill time.
I don't know, I think that's a pretty good way that the Jezebel put it pretty well.
Yeah.
Actually, they did a nice job of it.
Not really. They're referring to one comment made by someone rather than all of the rest of the adoration that she probably got from other people, probably people in her hometown, etc., not to mention the record books again and the medal that was being given to her. In fact, by saying that, it's kind of a snub to her because it ignores all the adulation that she did get that was correctly attributed for the errant comment of some guy whose job is to fill a bunch of time.
There's more sexism from the announcers. Are you ready for this?
More would seem to suggest that you've already defined some. I haven't seen any yet.
So here, the gymnastic team, the women's gym. I watched this actually.
Oh yeah, we're about to see how you watched it. This is what kills me about these kind of videos, and I see this a lot. People who jump on the bandwagon and make a bunch of assertions and read a lot of things into what other people say, talking about sexism or other things, then demonstrate their own without shame.
Because there's something about
something about what? Young girls in leotards? And lest you think that I'm being uncharitable myself here, just watch the video.
Anyway, I don't want to get too perverted, but I can't imagine that these guys don't say, the guys who have to cover the gymnasts, there's these women and the beach volleyball too. I'm just saying they shouldn't have men announcing those sports. They should have women announcing the female gymnastics. That's just it.
Okay, so here we have the admission, of course, that underage girls, I guess, in leotards turn this guy on, and he's unashamed of that. But more seriously, I mean, that's serious enough in and of itself. More seriously, though, just because you can't control yourself doesn't mean that other men can't. There are plenty of men who, say, some of us who have had children have a recognition for when someone is underage and aren't attracted to that. I think personally there's something wrong with a person. There's a bit of a mental illness or some kind of stunted emotional growth when they are attracted to underage bodies. Because the sex act between a man and woman is a mature act, and it's about an exchange between people emotionally and mentally. And you can't have that exchange with someone who is not fully developed into maturity, into adulthood. You can't have that exchange. It's not just physical. And again, just because you can't control yourself, yeah, I would agree, you shouldn't be judging any of these events. I'm not sure you should be watching them. But that doesn't mean that other men shouldn't be, or can't, or are not capable of being professional and doing the job that they should. And let's not all forget what this video is about. This video is about exposing sexism. And all he's done is reduce these young girls down to their sexuality, and any man who would otherwise be judging them down to his sexuality. Now that's sexist.
Because and the beach volleyball too, because the whole time the guy announcers are just trying to pretend like they're not looking at their asses, which we all know they are.
Because you are, am I right? Oh, they're playing a game? Who knew?
It's unbelievable. It's like you're watching porno. It's like, oh, it's porno plus, oh, there's a volleyball.
Who is it here that's reducing these women down to their sexuality in this video? Pop quiz. Who is it that's doing that?
Anyway, maybe this is sexist, what I'm saying, huh?
Probably, yeah.
Probably,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, is that your way of giving yourself a pass? Yeah, I'm not buying it.
So what happened was, no, what I'm saying is they should have women announcers for exactly this reason.
Why? Because you're sexist and you can't control yourself? Gotcha.
So they're there, and they killed it, by the way. They won by 10. They were leading their next closest competitor, China, by 10 points going into the... And so they're really crushing it. So here's a picture of them, right? So that's a nice picture of them, right? And they're all super talented. God damn, they're talented.
God damn, that's creepy. You really should stop that.
I was watching this, but I wasn't... I don't remember hearing a commentator say this because maybe I was talking.
Or something, right?
But I remember they were all, after the thing was over, they were all in a circle talking to each other. And they're laughing, right? They're happy. They're excited. They're kicking ass, right? And a yet unidentified commentator said Team USA's members look like they might as well be standing in the middle of a mall.
What?
Yes. He said they look like they might as well be standing in the middle of a mall after they were caught on camera laughing and talking following their utter annihilation of the competition during their qualifying round.
There's your sexism, folks. That's what we've boiled it down to now. If a commentator sees a group of girls standing around talking and laughing and just enjoying themselves, and he's seen the similar groups of girls in the mall doing the same thing and relates the two things, that's now sexism. That's what we've boiled down to. And of course, all the assumptions are being made. There's a bunch of inherent assumptions in the way that people are reading what this guy said. First of all, again, he's a guy there trying to fill airtime. And they're making the assumptions that he's belittling them, that he's saying that these are just a bunch of shoe shoppers, I guess. I don't know. They're not thinking about what he might mean behind that, or heaven forbid, if they really think it's a serious offense, to ask for clarification from the source. You know, you can imagine till the cows come home, but you could ask 100% of the people involved, namely that commentator, what he meant by that. But nobody really wants that, right? Nobody really wants understanding. No one really wants to get to the root of things and to figure out what's really going on. They just want to complain. As Darren Kearns said in a video recently, these people hate everything. There's nothing that would make them happy. You could not come up with a scenario that they wouldn't rip to shreds. Because they don't really want to be happy. They don't really want resolution.
That's what an unidentified commenter said. They might as well be standing in the middle of a mall. Now, I don't know. I guess a generous reading of that would be like, he looks like, oh, they just look like they're having a good time. They're not stressed. Look, they just look like they're just bumped into each other in the mall.
Well, at least you acknowledge that. The question I would have is, why is that not your primary assumption as to what his intent was? Again, intent doesn't matter anymore. But you're trying to determine his intent, aren't you? And you're not really willing to give him that charitable benefit of the doubt.
But it's a little bit weird. You wouldn't say that about 5 guys standing around. You don't say that about the 5 swimmers standing around. Oh, they look like they'd be standing in a mall.
No, and if you did, no one would care, because we don't concern ourselves with sexism against the male of the species. We certainly don't work it down to the microaggression level, right? But the thing is, have you been to a mall? How many stores in a mall cater to young men? They might make some other comment like a locker room or, I don't know, auto shop class or something else. They would make another comparison. And more importantly, no one would give a shit. And rightfully.
So here's the Twitter went nuts on this. So here's what Twitter had to say about it. No, NBC anchor, those female gymnasts do not look like they might as well be standing in the middle of a mall. They're at the Olympics. That was Natalie de Blasio. She's got a blue check, so you know she's important.
Okay, this is funny. This will get funny for later on. Here's what the Twitter said. Here's what Twitter said. Everybody knows they're at the Olympics. The commentator was at the Olympics. He wasn't saying, hey, there's some girls at the mall. He was saying those girls here at the Olympics are so jubilant, they look like they could just be a happy reuniting of friends at the mall. They're so jubilant, etc., etc. Everyone knows they're at the Olympics. The blue check means they're an important person. And keep this in mind as we go forward.
Megan Laher, she doesn't have a blue check, maybe not as important.
Are you sensing a pattern here? I'm not a big Twitter aficionado, but I think that the blue check means they've been Twitter verified. I don't think anybody's ranking them in terms of importance here.
Maddie Sweeney, also no check, so she's not as important as Natalie de Blasio.
Okay, you got that? So she's up here, she's down here somewhere. I'm not sure the other non-blue verified check person is down, maybe down a little bit lower. You got that figured out?
She says, oh, NBC Olympics guy hears Team USA gymnasts talking, says they might as well be at the mall because that's the only place girls could be.
Because that's what the guy said, right? The only place I can imagine them being is at the mall. As he's at the Olympics with them after they've had a crushing victory. Not very charitable, obviously.
And then finally at the bottom, Wicked Ginny says they could be standing in a mall. You wouldn't be talking about male gymnasts like that.
Or if you did, we wouldn't care. And we wouldn't be paying attention because no one is.
That is true. So we're not done with the sexism. There's just a couple of days so far at the Olympics.
And this is the sexism at the Olympics. This is the rampant sexism at the Olympics. This attempting to ascribe intent to sort of generalized, universal kind of statements made by people whose job it is to fill airtime and have to talk incessantly and constantly. I talk a lot, but I tell you this, I would not want their job. Now, one of two things I think is probably operational here. Either this is the extent of any kind of microscopic sexism that could be found at the Olympics, which is, of course, a wonderful sign. And it shows how desperately people want to uncover some sort of sexism. They're just desperate for it. Or there actually is some real sexism that exists. People being denied access to something. People being treated differently simply because of their gender and not because of their physical abilities and that sort of thing, and their desire, their passion, and their commitment and that sort of thing. And if that's the case, then these people have done a huge disservice to the real sexism that exists by focusing on these sort of little micro-transgression-y things, which again, really come down to intent. And no effort is made to determine the actual intent involved. It's a witch hunt.
This also happened. The Chicago Tribune came under fire for an article and a tweet about Corey Kajal Unreens. I don't know. I'm not pronouncing that word correctly. Those names correct. I'm bad with names. Don't kill me. But here's the name. Corey Kajal Unreens. And why are they in trouble? Because here's the tweet the Tribune put out. Wife of a Bears lineman wins a bronze medal today at Rio Olympics.
This guy's delivery. Oh my goodness. I guess it's hard to get good help these days. Is this what a professional looks like? So the woman who won this medal was being referred to, it sounds to me, in a regional area based on something that people would know. Someone of, what would we call that? Importance. Now, remember back when he said this person's got a blue check, they're important. This person here, not so important. So he's guilty of doing the same thing that he's accusing the Chicago Tribune of doing here, of relating it to something that its readership might know. And again, this was a tweet. So tweets are a little different. I think you have to be careful about how crazy you get over a single tweet and how it's worded and that sort of thing. Yes, maybe it was a little bit insensitive to the woman who actually won the medal. But to make the leap and assume that it's sexist is a bridge too far, because there's no evidence here that they did that because she's a woman. I think there should be some consideration given to the notion that it's not really cool to assume other people's intent. If you're going to ascribe sexism where there's no evidence that there's sexism, I think you're being sexist. I think that's how that works.
Wife of a Bears lineman.
Wow.
Well, once again, yes, it's probably insensitive, but I don't understand how you've attributed that to sexism. And in particular, I don't think you know who wrote the tweet.
What? She's an Olympic medalist.
Well, what was your first clue? The picture of her holding the medal?
Maybe you mention her name. Maybe she has an identity outside of her husband.
Yes, maybe she has an identity outside of that important person. You see what happens when you rank people on a hierarchical scale? Blue check marks and stuff like that. Yes, I think maybe they should have mentioned her name. I think that would have been the appropriate thing to do. They didn't do it, so that's inappropriate. That's insensitive. But I still don't understand how you've attributed that to sexism on the part of the person who posted that tweet.
The tweet focused more on the career of the NFL player husband, Mitch Unrein, than her own achievement. That's from HuffPo.
Well, again, not really. It sort of mentioned them equally in the tweet, but the picture was of her with the medal. So no, they didn't focus more on his achievements than hers. But the other thing one would have to ask is this not possible if some otherwise unknown man won some sort of an award and he had a wife who was a famous actress, especially a famous actress from the same region that the newspaper was tweeting from, et cetera, if they would not maybe do the same thing. I don't know, but I think that's an important question to ask before you assume that the impetus behind all this is sexist treatment of the woman.
Allison Carter, who has a blue check, so you know she's important.
And it's really important to point out people who are important.
She said probably could have / should have localized it with Chicago resident.
Yes, I think so. And I think obviously they just should have used her name. But if you were going to use it to localize the story, at first I thought, yes, they should do that. Chicago resident wins, gold medal or something like that. And that would alleviate any claims of sexism. And then I realized, no, it won't, because we're on a witch hunt.
Yeah, so if you want to localize it, you don't say, oh, this Chicago Bears wife. You say local resident wins Olympic medal.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll put Jimmy Dore in charge of proofreading everyone's tweets to make sure that they're not sexist. Hopefully, with the 140 character limit, he can keep himself from waxing on too long about those sexy little gymnasts. This is the guy who's going to tell everybody else how they should speak. Oh, my God.
It's all bad at the bottom said, husband of Olympic medal winner Corey Codgel plays football for the Chicago Bears. Fixed it. See how he switched it around?
Oh, yes, I do see how he switched it around. And you see how it's suddenly more palatable? You see how you now suddenly don't have a problem with it? Now, let me ask you again, who is the sexist here? We don't give a shit if you do it to a man. Just so you know.
Husband of Olympic medal winner plays for the Chicago. But here's the ultimate twist on this, right? Because NBC has not commented on that incident, quote, which came just days after a study by the Cambridge University Press that found that in the media's coverage of sports, men were 3 times more likely to be mentioned in a sporting context than women. Women who, meanwhile, were routinely described with regards to non-sporting issues, such as their age, their marital status, and their appearance.
Now, here's an area where your interpretation of these things, I think, is really telling. You're immediately jumping to assume the worst about people. Now, first of all, I'm not familiar with this study. I don't know how rigorous it was and that sort of thing, because a lot of these studies end up being run by social sciences departments. And I think they're biased to begin with, because they're just like this video, and the people who are all focusing on the Olympics are looking for any kind of subtle sexism that they can find, even if it doesn't exist, and then assuming people's intent and that sort of thing. I think this can happen in some of these studies. But even so, you're assuming the ramifications of this study, that men are more likely to be mentioned in a sporting context, and women in sports are more likely to be mentioned for things outside of the sporting context. You're saying it's because we don't take maybe women seriously when they're in sports or something like that. We're trivializing them. We're reducing them to their bodies. And again, this is Jimmy Dore, who's going to moralize to all of us about reducing women to their bodies, their appearance, their age, that sort of thing. But another way of looking at it might be to say we don't care that much about who men are outside of their utility. In this case, their sporting utility. Whereas women, we care a little bit more about who they are. Who makes up this person? Right? What is their life about? Could it be that we actually care more about who the person is when it's a woman in a sporting event, and when it's a man, we care a little bit more just about what his utility is? What did he run that mile in, or whatever the particular event is? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. And I think it's philosophically honest, intellectually honest, to ask the question instead of making a bunch of assumptions about what this study means in terms of our attitudes towards men and women.
So there you go. I look forward to more of this happening, because it will.
What is with this guy? You look forward to more sexism happening? Because it will? I think Darren Kern is right. These people can't be made happy. In fact, the only thing that makes them happy is to find more sexism. So that's why they have to keep reducing it down smaller and smaller and finer to find the little vestiges of sexism that they think actually exist, because that's the only thing that makes them happy. They're not seeking a resolution. This guy certainly isn't. I look forward to more of this happening.
I think that's kind of, I get why women want Hillary to be president. I get that whole, I get that. I get it.
Oh, right. I forgot that part was at the end of the video. Yes, women want Hillary Clinton for president. They want a serial liar for president, which is pretty obvious that she is. I made a comment on someone's YouTube channel the other day. I said, as a serial liar, Hillary Clinton is unfit to run for municipal office, let alone the highest office in the land of arguably the most powerful country in the world. That alone should disqualify her, not to mention all of the other geopolitical destabilization she's done over her career. And to think that she is on the side of women because her slogan is, I'm with her, meaning her, Hillary Clinton, we're all supposed to be with her, is a joke. Any woman who's actually looked into the way she treats women, if there's anything contentious involving her campaign, or her husband, should give their head a shake, because you're either for women or you're not. And those principles have to be universalized for them to be meaningful in any way, shape, or form. Any politician, and pretty much all politicians will, can get up on a podium and say, I stand for you, I'm with you. They're there for themselves. Hillary Clinton is no different. She's a career politician, and it's ridiculous to think that she's going to do any more probably for women if she gets into office than Barack Obama has done for his constituents. In any event, I know it's kind of low-hanging fruit to do a response video to Jimmy Dore, but by the same token, I think it's important to point out some of the counter-arguments to some of these things, because what I see as I look through the YouTube sphere and the world in general is a lot of very partisan politics. And so a lot of people have this tendency to think that they have to side with a person who claims to be on the same ideological side of the ideological fence as they are. And then they've got to defend that person, et cetera, et cetera. And I think quite often people don't analyze or critique friendly voices the way they would critique an adversary. And I think it's important to critique all people, fairly equally. And this is one of the reasons why I don't put anybody up on a pedestal. I'm not interested. I'm not a partisan person. I'm not interested in investing myself in another person to that degree, because you never know what's going on behind the scenes, what some of the subroutines are that are going on and that sort of thing. So I'm not willing to invest myself in anyone else to any more degree than I can vouch for them. And that's usually not very much. As I've said before, I can barely vouch for this guy. And so I'm not willing to do that. And I think it's important to be skeptical of pretty much all politicians and all talking heads, all people in media, and that includes the alternative media on YouTube and everywhere else. That includes being skeptical of everything I say, and probably skeptical of everything that we individually think. Introspection is important, etc., etc. So thanks to anyone who's made it this far for watching. Have a lovely day.